this room responds directly to the early interest in not only African American folk tales and fairy tales, but also European fairy tales like Hans Christian Andersen. But what was interesting, at one point I was beginning to think about the projects that I was illustrating, and I realized that one of the things that seemed to be missing in this sort of body of work on African American literature, that there were no stories that said open with once upon a time. And I said, oh, no, there's no story. Because in a sense, the 300 years or so was very short history. So again, you didn't find one once upon a time. So I was looking for a story where I could sort of open with once upon a time. And it turned out it was The Hired Hand, which was a story about an owner of a mill, a sawmill. And it takes place in this country, and I was trying to figure a time period, and I was trying to answer and find a story that would say where you could go once upon a time. But once upon a time would have been slavery. So, so what I found that, and in having conversation with librarians, there was a town in Virginia where the Quakers had gathered and created a space that was a sanction for African Americans to escape from slavery. And in that particular town, they actually had a school, and they had mills, and it was a community, it was a full community. So my Once Upon a Time in Virginia was a real town where you would have found a person of color running a mill. So again, there's usually you know, kind of a story behind all the pictures. I look over there, and you find the Hans Christian Andersen, The Little Match Girl. And The Little Match Girl was born out of actually working on the story of Minty, young Harriet Tubman, where in order for me to be able to emotionally handle slavery and what it must have been like to be a child during that period of time, what I did was, so that I can't enter these images and like the slave trade with feeling like I was wounded or injured or angry. So in order to get cross over that hurdle, what I did was I started out by researching the history of slavery. So when you start researching the history of slavery, there's a context for the slave trade, the African slave trade, and because you can connect it with others, you know, other cultures that the slaves are part of their particular culture. And then I went from there, because I went from there to really get an understanding the pain that might have caused children, and I started reading about the children in the North. Not slavery, but the ones who worked in the industrial mills in the North. And when I satisfied that sense of understanding the fullness or the depth of slavery, then I was able to do Minty, but it allowed me, but also the images in that research stayed with me. So my wife, she works with me, and we were reading stories on Hans Christian Andersen, because their stories are they're so universal. One, I went back to those images that I saw of the images from the young people who worked in the industrial North, and I also thought about homeless kids. So my Little Match Girl is in a tenement house. It could be in Boston, or it could be in New York, and so even the stories that I do are Eurocentric. I change the setting, these universal stories, and they become really stories that speak about the American condition and experience. Rikki Tikki Tavi, I didn't mention it early, and it stands out simply for the pure joy of reading Rudyard Kipling's work. And I said earlier, I'm dyslexic, so I was never a big reader, but and a slow reader, but Rudyard Kipling's, how he takes text and brings a visual life to it. I think maybe that was the connection. His language, it's so incredibly colorful and packaged in a way that's very dramatic. And he also tapped in, or I tapped into something that, in a way, what I was trying to do with my work and making an anthropomorphic or personification of the animals. He did that so incredibly well with the Jungle Book, where the animals were animals, but they talked to one another. So in a sense, I took that and became a muse in so many ways to what I was trying to do with my art and with the use, especially with animal life. And I think perhaps when you think about it, if you think about the Caldecott winner, the Lion and the Mouse, the lion is a lion and the mouse is a mouse, but at the same time, there's something going on, you know, with the two of them. And I can say that it comes. I mean, I could talk about the Little Match Girl in the urban scenes as being greatly influenced by the Ashcan School, and it's in the way they took urban life and brought it to the front. I could say the same thing about Rudyard Kipling's text, and the nature of his writing actually influenced my visual images. And again, my animals are animals, but they talk. Or they dress up, you know, with the Uncle Remus tales. I haven't had the question asked yet, but I assume it's going to come. How do you go from the slave trade to the Lion and the Mouse and to the Three Little Kittens? And the answer to that, thank you for asking that question. Yeah, right. It's you see.
You can't be in the dark places all
right.
the time.
Exactly.
Mix it up.
That's it. And not only that, I'm responding. I have a 3.5-year-old great-granddaughter.
Oh, my goodness.
And I've been watching what kind of things engage her into books, and I was also thinking about the role that technology seems to be playing and what children seem to gravitate to. So I was taking those two things, what's happening with technology and then what's happening in terms of my great-granddaughter, and I wanted to, first of all, produce and illustrate stories that they could relate to, but also had at the core a sense of that line of legacy or the line of where these stories originated. So in my stories that I adapt, you can still see the roots, or you can see where they came from, and that's been very important to me. But it's mixed up in a way that, and turned on its head in a little different ways. The Lion and the Mouse, the Aesop's Fables, it's a wordless, so somewhat wordless picture book, where the investment is that the child can create their own stories based on how they read the pictures, how they, and the Three Little Kittens. I noticed that, in a sense, that's been around forever, and it's a nonsense nursery rhyme, which I had sort of played with. My wife said I should do it, and I kind of played with it. But the mittens, the kittens, who I can understand them losing their mittens, but the idea of eating pie with their mittens on, I couldn't wrap my head around. And what happened was watching my granddaughter, where I was trying to make everything match up, or come to a clean ending. Where watching her play, things don't have to match up; they can just be. And she plays with the use of the imagination. And watching her, I love the story. She has a great pair of shoes, sandals, a pair that's orange and a pair that's yellow. And she loves to put the orange one on one foot and the yellow on the other. And she's so proud of herself. I mean, and it's such a kind of a fun thing. Okay, why not? So the why not allowed me to enter into this nonsense nursery, and I think have fun with it. and how it's also, I love the exercise of taking these classic stories or rhymes and then adding something to it. In this case, with the Three Little Kittens, we actually, you know, the Three Little Kittens lost their mittens and began to cry. Well, in my version, you actually see the kittens lose their mittens. You can see this beginning to happen, and there's a mitten. And so that the child now has to play along, and the child is traveling with those kittens as they lose the mittens. When they return home, they actually go out to find them. So they return to the same place. So the child returns to the same place with the kittens to find their mittens. And so there's always this, and that's the part that I love, is that there's always a play of taking this classic rhyme or story and whatnot, and then and looking at it through a different lens, and giving you, the viewer, especially the moms and the parents and the grandparents, something to hold on to, but it's viewed through a different way. And one of the real example is, and I'm still asking, have you ever seen a Little Red Riding Hood where it takes place in the winter? And it sets up a whole, how you doing, whole new sense of challenges. You know, the original, she takes Granny something, something to eat, and on the way meets the wolf who tricks her, so okay, if it's snowing in this winter, what is, you remember she takes Granny flowers. So, but it's winter. So what in this case, Little Red takes Granny kindling to start a fire because Granny's sick. Also, the snow allows the woodsman to track the wolf.